I never thought I would become the neighborhood rebel, but sometimes life forces your hand. My name is Michael, and for 15 years I worked as a structural engineer specializing in residential developments. I built subdivisions, designed safe, family homes, and earned a reputation for being meticulous, reliable, and obsessed with details. My career thrived on rules, codes, regulations, compliance checklists. These were my daily bread. I thought I understood rules better than anyone. I thought following them was always the safe path. Then I moved into Sunnyside Estates and discovered that sometimes following the rules means fighting the people who claim to enforce them. Sunnyside Estates sat just outside the city, a gated neighborhood with tree-lined streets and houses that looked like they belonged on glossy real estate brochures. Each lawn was trimmed, each driveway was spotless, and at first glance it looked like paradise for someone like me. Orderly, predictable, but behind that order was something else. Something I did not fully see until it was too late. The community was ruled by a homeowner association, and the homeowner association was ruled by one woman, Karen Wilkins. When I purchased my corner lot 18 months ago, the seller mentioned casually that the association was a bit particular about appearances. I had lived under associations before, so I nodded. I thought it meant no tacky lawn ornaments, no broken down trucks on the grass, no holiday lights that stayed up until spring. That sounded reasonable. I could follow those rules. I had no idea I was walking into the strictest, pettiest, and most tyrannical neighborhood government I would ever experience. 3 days after moving in, while I was still surrounded by half boxes and trying to figure out which breaker switch controlled the garage lights, I heard the sharp double chime of the doorbell. It was an aggressive sound, almost accusatory, and over the next year it would become the soundtrack of my homeowner nightmares. On the porch stood Karen herself. She looked like she had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, a crisp white pantsuit, a pearl necklace that gleamed in the sun, and a perfectly sculpted blonde bob that looked like it had been designed with a protractor. Her hair did not move. When she tilted her head, I later learned it never moved. The amount of hairspray required to hold that shape could have powered a rocket launch. "Hello there," she said, her voice dripping with a kind of forced cheer that did not reach her eyes. "I am Karen Wilkins, president of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowner Association. I wanted to personally welcome you to our little community." Before I could respond, she thrust a heavy binder into my arms. The gold embossed words on the cover gleamed in the sunlight. Sunnyside Estates Community Guidelines. All 78 pages are mandatory reading, she explained smoothly. I recommend you highlight the sections about lawn maintenance and exterior modifications. We have had issues with new homeowners in the past. The way she said issues made it sound like past residents had tried to build junkyards in their driveways or paint their houses neon purple. I thanked her politely, because what else could I do? I assumed this would be the last I saw of her for a while. That assumption was my first mistake. That evening, after stacking dishes in the cupboards, I sat down with the binder. I expected a list of basic rules. Instead, I found a document that read more like military regulations than neighborhood guidelines. There were 12 approved shades of beige for exterior paint, each with its own code. There was a rule limiting the maximum height of garden gnomes to 8 inches. There was a chart of flowers approved for front yard planting, broken down by season and even by color. A section on holiday decorations warned that lights had to be removed no later than 2 days after the grace period ended. Trash bins could only be visible from the street during a 12-hour collection window. I shook my head in disbelief, but decided that if these were the rules, I would follow them. After all, I had built a career on meeting codes and following standards. If the price of peace in Sunnyside Estates was a little conformity, I would pay it. For 6 months, I was the model resident. My lawn was cut to exactly 3.5 inches, not a millimeter more or less. My mailbox matched the approved design and was painted in the exact shade of black matte paint specified in the binder. My front door was painted sandstone whisper, the only allowed color for corner lots with eastern exposure. I became almost obsessive about making sure trash bins never lingered outside past the approved window. And for those 6 months, I lived in peace. I watched Karen patrol the neighborhood in her luxury SUV, clipboard in hand, issuing violation notices to unlucky neighbors. She never stopped at my house. She never even slowed down. I took a quiet pride in my invisible perfection, even as I rolled my eyes at the absurdity. The monthly newsletter included lists of infractions, things like unapproved wind chime audible from sidewalk, and holiday lights removed late. I laughed at it, thinking I had cracked the code to surviving here. I was wrong. The trouble began with Hedges. My lot was a corner property, and one side of my yard faced a busy street. The noise from cars and the glare of headlights had begun to bother me, so I decided to plant a row of privacy hedges. I studied the handbook carefully. Page 42, paragraph 6. Natural privacy barriers may be approved provided they do not exceed 6 feet in height and do not impede visibility at street corners. Perfect. I did my research and chose emerald green arbor vitae, a species specifically listed in the appendix as approved. I hired a landscaper from the association's approved list, ensured the hedges were planted at 5 feet 10 inches, and measured the setback from the corner 15 feet, well beyond the required 10. I even took photographs and logged the measurements, just in case there was ever a question. The hedges looked beautiful. They gave me privacy, reduced the noise, and made my yard feel like my own sanctuary. For 3 weeks, I enjoyed the peaceful buffer. For 3 weeks, I thought I had improved my home in full compliance with the rules. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I came home from work to find Karen in my yard with 2 men holding hedge trimmers. My hedges were gone, reduced to stumps, barely 3 feet tall. The sight hit me like a punch to the chest. I slammed my car door and stormed across the lawn. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" Karen turned toward me, her designer sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. "Oh, Michael," she said smoothly, "your hedges were in violation of Code 4.7b. They obstructed the critical sight line. At the corner, as president, I have the authority to remedy violations when homeowners fail to comply after notification." "Notification?" I barked. "I never received any notification. It was emailed last week," she said dismissively. "The board voted for emergency action due to safety concerns. You will be billed for the trimming. $375. I stared at the mangled remains of what had cost me nearly $2,000. The handbook clearly states written notice must be delivered directly with a compliance window. Email newsletters do not qualify. Karen's smile never wavered. "I am sorry you feel that way, but what is done is done." That night I sat in my living room, staring at the gutted hedges through the window. My anger simmered. I had followed the rules to the letter. She had broken them, and she thought she could get away with it because she was the president. That was the night I decided I would not roll over. I reread the handbook line by line, and there it was, a clause about structural privacy barriers. While natural hedges were capped, walls were different. A homeowner could build a 6-foot perimeter wall if it complied with county codes and was approved by the architectural committee. The next morning, I filed an application for a 6-foot cinder block wall. I attached blueprints, renderings, and material specifications. The bylaws said the committee had 14 days to respond. If they failed, the application was automatically approved. 14 days passed, no response. On the 15th day, I rented an excavator and started digging. Karen arrived within an hour, her SUV screeching to a stop at the curb. She jumped out, heels sinking into my lawn, and shouted, "What do you think you are doing? You cannot build a wall here." I shut down the excavator and climbed out calmly, clipboard in hand. "Actually, Karen, I can," according to bylaw 7.3, after 14 days with no response, "my application is automatically approved. Here is the date stamp. Here is your signature." From the certified mail receipt, her face turned red. "This is outrageous. I never saw this application." "You signed for it personally," I said, holding up the receipt. She sputtered, nearly choking on her own indignation. "I will call an emergency board meeting. This wall will not stand." "It is not a loophole," I said evenly. "It is procedure, your procedure." I climbed back into the excavator and resumed digging, the roar of the engine drowning out her protests. The battle lines had been drawn. Over the next weeks, I built my wall brick by brick. Neighbors stopped by, curious about the construction. When I explained what had happened, many shared their own stories about Karen: bird feeders taken down, flowers ripped out, fines for leaving trash bins out too long. I realized I was not the only one. I was just the first to fight back. Karen tried everything to stop me. She taped violation notices to my door, claiming my construction materials were improperly stored. I rented a storage pod and placed it 17 feet from the curb, 1 foot beyond the requirement. She called the county inspector, claiming I was building without a permit, but I had all my permits in order, and the inspector ended up complimenting my work, saying it was the best masonry he had seen in years. Then came the fountain. The inspector mentioned, almost casually, that the neighborhood's decorative fountain at the entrance had been reported for lacking permits. Karen had pushed it through without approval, spending nearly $30,000 of association funds. I checked county records. She had not even applied for a permit. I filed a complaint, and within days the county issued a stop work order and fined the association $5,000. That was when I realized Karen's reign was built not on rules, but on intimidation. And intimidation only works when no one pushes back. I began gathering evidence, financial records, board meeting minutes, testimony from former board members and neighbors. A retired accountant named Mrs. Chen, who had once been treasurer before Karen forced her off the board, confirmed my suspicions of mismanagement. Landscaping contracts awarded to Karen's brother-in-law at double market rates, unexplained transfers of funds, violations of meeting procedures. Piece by piece, I built a case. When the wall was finished, standing tall and strong with approved desert tone paint and decorative planters, I also finished my dossier, 15 pages of violations, infractions, and financial irregularities. I printed copies for every homeowner. At the annual meeting, I handed them out. The room, usually sparsely attended, was packed. Nearly 100 residents held my report in their hands. When Karen tried to begin the meeting, Mrs. Chen stood and called for a vote of no confidence. The motion was seconded instantly by a dozen voices. The bylaws allowed it. The vote was nearly unanimous. 92 homeowners voted to remove Karen. Only she and her closest ally voted against. Her face drained of color as she realized her reign was over. The vice president, David Thompson, stepped forward to assume control. He immediately announced an audit committee and suspended all outstanding violation notices. The room erupted in quiet cheers. I walked home that night. The cool air felt lighter. My wall stood solid, a monument to malicious compliance. I had not broken a single rule. I had only followed them. Karen had destroyed herself. She confronted me one last time in my driveway, her bob slightly disheveled, her voice shaking. With rage, "You engineered this whole thing just to humiliate me." "No, Karen," I said wearily. "You engineered this yourself. I just followed the rules, your rules." Mrs. Chen appeared behind her, holding documents. "Care to explain why $20,000 of association funds were transferred to your personal account last month?" For the first time since I had met her, Karen Wilkins had no words. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was finished, and I, the rule follower who never wanted to be a rebel, finally felt free.